Hello, everyone. Welcome to January 20th afternoon devotional and Bible study. Today we're going to be reading Jesus is Calling for today and the book of 1 Samuel, chapter 5. Today is a very different day for a lot of different people, and it can be very distracting for a bunch with things kind of going on in the world right now, but I want to take this time to focus on Christ and focus on our relationship with him. So I'm going to try to minimize all of that stuff and focus on Jesus. So let's get started with Jesus is Calling for today. Approach this day with awareness of who is boss. As you make plans for the day, remember that it is I who orchestrate the events of your life. On days when things go smoothly according to your plans, you may be unaware of my sovereign presence. On days when your plans are thwarted, be on the lookout for me. I may be doing something important in your life, something quite different from what you expected. It is essential at such times to stay in communication with me. Accepting my way is better than yours. Don't try to figure out what's happening. Simply trust me and thank me in advance for the good that will come out of it all. I know the plans I have for you, and they are good. Sorry, my cats are getting into a little bit of a fight, but that's okay. They're playing. They're not fighting. They're playing. And that was inspired by two different Bible verses. The first, as heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. As the rain and the snow come down from heaven, and do not return to it, without watering the earth and making it bud and flourish, so that it yields seeds for the sower and bread for the eater, so is my word that goes out from my mouth, that it will not return to me empty, but will accomplish what I desired and achieve the purpose for which I sent it. Isaiah 55, 9-11. And then, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future. Jeremiah 29:11. Yeah, I like that. I know the plans I have for you. They're good. Approach each day with the reminder that, yeah, he is boss. In the good and in the bad. And yeah, sometimes his ways aren't our ways. And we might get frustrated and angry at him for that. But I think that's okay. So now we're going to jump into 1 Samuel chapter 5. Up to this point, you had the priest Eli. His sons were really not taking their place great, and they were being super disrespectful, and they were creating barriers between the Jewish people and God. And God was like, well, I'm not going to stand for this anymore. And he told Samuel of the plans, and Samuel boldly ended up speaking that to Eli, who was kind of prepared to hear the bad news. And then the Philistines came up, and they were going to attack Israel, and Israel started to fail. So Israel was like, all right, cool. Now it's time to bring out the big guns. And they brought in their secret weapon that was feared all over the land, the Ark of the Covenant. The Philistines were afraid of this too, because they were like, this is what beat the Egyptians. The Ark of the Covenant, they're bringing their gods into battle now. We're in trouble. And as the battle went on, Eli's sons ended up dying, and the Philistines captured the Ark of the Covenant. Word of what happened came back, and Eli was an old elderly man in his 90s, and he heard the news, and he ended up dying because he fell over and he hit his head. His daughter-in-law, distraught that her husband and her brother-in-law had passed away, died during childbirth while saying the glory of Israel is now lost. This, for the nation of Israel, felt like one of the bleakest and darkest times that they could ever imagine. They lost God. They lost the Ark of the Covenant. They lost the family that's supposed to guide and direct them is dying, and that's not supposed to happen. And this is where we're going to continue the story in this situation of hopelessness. So if you can, open with me to 1 Samuel chapter 5, and we're going to continue the story. Bible Gateway, great thing if you're on a computer. The Bible app is great if you're on the phone. Better yet, grab a physical Bible and read along with me. All right, without further ado, 1 Samuel chapter 5. After the Philistines captured the Ark of God... sorry, I had my bookmark fall out of my Bible. After the Philistines captured the Ark of God, they took it from the battleground at Ebenezer to the town of Ashdod. They carried the ark into the temple of Dagon and placed it beside the idol of Dagon. But when the citizens of Ashdod went to see it the next morning, Dagon had fallen with its face to the ground in front of the ark of the Lord. So they took Dagon and put it back in its place. But the next morning the same thing happened, and Dagon had fallen face down before the ark of God. I have to flip the page. Fallen face down again in the ark of God, of the Lord. Sorry. This time his head and hands had broken off and were laying in the doorway. Only the trunk of his body was left intact. That is why, to this day, neither priests of Dagon nor anyone who enters the temple of Dagon in Ashdod will step on its threshold. Then the Lord's heavy hand struck the people of Ashdod and the nearby villages with a plague of tumors. When the people realized what was happening, they cried out, "We can't keep the Ark of God of Israel here any longer. He is against us. We will all be destroyed along with Dagon, our God." So they called together the rulers of the Philistine towns and asked, "What should we do with the ark of the God of Israel?" The rulers discussed it and replied, "Move it to the town of Gath." So they moved the ark of the God of Israel to Gath. But when the ark arrived at Gath, the Lord's heavy hand fell on its men, young and old, and struck them with a plague of tumors. And there was great panic. So they sent the ark of God to the town of Ekron. But when the people of Ekron saw it coming, they cried out, "They are bringing the ark of God, the ark of the God of Israel here to kill us too." The people summoned the Philistine rulers again and begged them, "Please, send the ark of God of Israel back to its own country, or it will kill us all." For the deadly plague from God had already begun, and great fear was sweeping across the town. Those who didn't die were affected with tumors, and they cried from the town, and the cry from the town rose to heaven. May God add a blessing to the reading of his word. All right. This is a little bit of an interesting one. Hi, Tracy. Hi, Ryan. Welcome. So, God is greater than all of these things. And the people know the power of God in this history. What happened in Egypt has spread all over, and now they captured their God. They captured the God of Israel, and in an attempt to hold them back, to take the secret weapon that the Israelites had, the Ark of the Covenant, their God, they ended up taking it and moving it from town to town to town to town. When I first read this, one of the first thoughts I had that came into my head was the golden calf. So you might remember that story from Exodus when we read that together. But as Moses was up and worshiping, Aaron and a few other Israelites ended up making this golden calf, the calf of Baal. And they started worshiping it, this thing that they made from their hands. And God came down and destroyed it. And Moses was like, you got to get everyone to eat and drink their idol. One of the Ten Commandments is, I don't have it with me off the top of my head because it's his reaction. I want to look it up. It's like Exodus 20 something. I should really know that off the top of my head, but I'm not good at really remembering all this stuff sometimes. I want to read it. Yeah, it is Exodus 20. Woohoo, I had it right. So you must not make for yourself an idol of any kind or image of anything in heavens or on earth. You must not bow down or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, who will not tolerate your affliction for any other gods. So that section there, that's what this kind of reminds me of. So you hear this, here's this other God. And they have idols and everything that they've placed and made for it. And that God ends up bowing down. And the people continue to try to use this idol to do stuff. And the people are like forcing this God to be on equal footing. They're putting the idol next to the Ark of the Covenant, which is believed to be carrying God. And God demonstrates his power over the idol, over the other God. He knocks him down and then breaks the statue. And he puts it on the threshold, which I'm going to get back to. So God demonstrates his power over other gods. And then he also demonstrates how if we misrepresent God, if we misrepresent him, that there are consequences. When they start taking the covenant from town to town to town to town, and they're literally trying to take God away from the Israelites. God doesn't like that. And he gives them plagues and tumors, and the power of God is being demonstrated as they're trying to take God away from them, and it's not working. Today, in our daily life, Jesus died on the cross. The curtain is broken. We can have God with us. God isn't in a building. He's not in a place. He's not in the ark. God can literally be with you. Jesus can literally be with you, and no one can take God from you. That's not something that can happen anymore. But at the time, even Israel placed the Ark of the Covenant in God's position. And this was a teaching thing for Israel, but also for all the other nations, that the God of Israel is greater than all other gods, like we just read in Exodus 20. And that we should have no other gods through him. But as they continue to learn things, like God isn't just contained in the ark, which is also another really cool thing. The other thing with the threshold made me go they don't step on the threshold. The thing, the doorway, is at the beginning of that whole nursery rhyme. Don't step on a crack or you'll break your mother's back. That was a thought I had. Now I'm all the way in Exodus, but I should be in Samuel. There was one other point I wanted to make. That was yeah, at the end of the day, their decision was to give the special weapon back. Let's just give it back to where you stole it from, because it's too much trouble. It's too much of a risk. As we're trying to contain and hold a God that doesn't belong to us, it's too much. So here's the question I have. In what ways might you be keeping somebody, anybody, from getting to know God? In what ways have you projected idolism on a thing, a person, a position, that you're idolizing and putting in front of God? And what are some of those consequences that might happen from you doing that? Especially with everything going on in the world right now, which I am trying to avoid. But we have a tendency to do that. And some of the most brilliant people, some of the people most earnestly looking for God, can put the creation in front of the Creator. And we've seen that time and time again throughout human history, but even today. We've seen that with political and religious leaders today, that people keep on putting the creation, whether that's the position, the power, the person, the objects, in front of the Creator, in front of God. And I think this chapter has a pretty stern warning against that, and a pretty strong and stern warning about trying to take God away from people. And notice that it's not forcing God on people, because that's the other thing that the Philistines were trying to do. They were trying to force God on people, and it brought tumors, it brought death, it brought destruction, and it brought fear. God is love. He shouldn't be feared. So the Philistines, who also weren't super believing in God, were forcing God to dwell amongst the people, knowing that it was a powerful weapon, the Ark of the Covenant, the Ark of God, the Ark of the God of Israel. Interesting. I didn't click into that until I continued to ramble, that the Philistines were forcing God onto people. It's interesting. All right, let's pray. AJC, awesome Jesus Christ. I thank you for that revelation that, yeah, the Philistines were trying to force God on people, and it bringing death, destruction, and fear. I thank you that you don't bring death, destruction, and fear, but you bring hope and love and forgiveness and so much more. May you work on our hearts to seek you and invite you in, and not work on our hearts in order to force you upon others, but let our lives live in such a way that it is an ongoing sacrifice, where the world is better because of your presence in our lives and our lives being present in this world. Help guide us, direct us, mold us. Let us not get in the way of somebody else coming to know you. Help us to steer each other away from sin and into your arms. Help give us the excitement for each day, and to see how sometimes even just staying home is of an act of worship to you. That resting might be an act of worship to you, but also doing and being. Use us, Lord. You are awesome. Thank you for calling us. Thank you for directing us, for guiding us, for loving us, and for forgiving us. I lift up all of our friends and family that know you and that don't know you. help us to put whatever it is that we got out of today's Bible study, whatever we got out of today's devotional, help us to put it into practice. You're awesome, Lord. Thank you very much. All right. Well, and hi, Nancy. Welcome. Yeah. So that is January 20th, live stream devotional and Bible study. Have a fantastic Wednesday. I am running Jackbox tonight. So if you're watching this before 7 o'clock, feel free to join us. Drop me a private message and I'll hook you up with the ability to come in and join us and have some fun, have some good laughs. But yeah, all right. Later.